In the history of Islam, there are moments that completely changed the course of events, moments that seemed like setbacks but were in fact brilliant strokes of strategic genius. One of the most significant of these is the Treaty of Al-Hudabiya, a story of patience, faith, and ultimate victory. Imagine this, it's the year 628. Add 6 years after the Prophet Muhammad and his followers migrated from Mecca to Medina, the Muslims longed to return to their spiritual home, Mecca, to perform the Umrah, the lesser pilgrimage. Their hearts were filled with a deep yearning to see the Kaaba again. So, with about 1,400 unarmed men dressed in the simple white garments of pilgrims, the Prophet Muhammad set out for Mecca. They came in peace, their only intention to fulfill their religious duty. But as they approached Mecca, they were met with hostility. The Quraysh, the ruling tribe of Mecca and the Prophet's staunchest enemies, were not going to let them in. They dispatched their cavalry to block the Muslims' path. To avoid a confrontation, the Prophet took a different, more difficult route, leading his companions to a place called Al-Hudabiya, right on the outskirts of the sacred territory of Mecca. Here at Hudabiya, a tense standoff began. The Quraysh were adamant the Muslims would not enter Mecca this year. Negotiations started with envoys going back and forth between the two camps. The Muslims were in a difficult position. They were far from home, unarmed, and their path was blocked. The situation was fragile, and any misstep could lead to bloodshed. During these tense negotiations, a rumor spread like wildfire through the Muslim camp. Their envoy to the Quraysh, Uthman ibn Affan, had been killed. This was a grave violation of diplomatic norms. In response, the Prophet Muhammad gathered his companions under a tree. There, they took a solemn oath, one by one, placing their hands on his. They pledged to stand by the Prophet, to fight to the death if necessary, and not to flee. This powerful display of unity and loyalty is known as the Pledge of the Tree or Bayat al-Ridwan, and it is even mentioned in the Quran as an event that earned God's pleasure. Fortunately, the rumor turned out to be false. Uthman returned unharmed, but the pledge had a profound effect. It showed the Quraysh the unwavering resolve of the Muslims. Realizing that a military conflict would be costly, the Quraysh became more willing to negotiate a peaceful solution. They sent their chief negotiator, Suhail ibn Amr, to finalize a treaty. The negotiations that followed were a true test of patience and wisdom for the Muslims. The terms proposed by Suhail seemed on the surface to be completely unfair and humiliating. Let's break down the key points of what became known as the Treaty of Al-Hudabiya. First, a 10-year truce. All hostilities between the Muslims in Medina and the Quraysh in Mecca would cease for a decade. This seemed like a positive step towards peace. Second, the pilgrimage. The Muslims had to turn back that year without performing Umrah. They could, however, return the following year, but only for 3 days, and they could only carry the swords of travelers sheathed. For the companions who had traveled so far with their hearts set on seeing the Kaaba, this was a bitter pill to swallow. Third, a clause about the return of people. This was perhaps the most difficult condition to accept. It stated that if any man from the Quraysh fled to join the Muslims in Medina without his guardian's permission, he must be returned to Mecca. However, if a Muslim from Medina fled to join the Quraysh in Mecca, he would not be returned. This one-sided condition caused a great deal of distress among the Muslims. It felt like a betrayal of those who sought refuge with them. Fourth, alliances. The treaty allowed any tribe to freely enter into an alliance with either the Muslims or the Quraysh. This clause would prove to be more significant than it initially appeared. Many of the Prophet's companions were deeply upset by these terms. The great companion Umar ibn al-Khattab was so distressed that he went to the Prophet and questioned the decision, asking, "Are we not on the truth and they on falsehood? Why should we accept humiliation in matters of our religion?" It was a moment of intense emotion. The Muslims saw it as a retreat, a concession to their enemies, but the Prophet Muhammad, guided by divine wisdom, saw something else. He saw a greater victory hidden within this apparent defeat. He accepted the terms. He calmly reassured his companions, telling them that this was a command from God and that God would not forsake them. He saw that peace, even a peace with seemingly unfair terms, was more valuable than a costly and uncertain war. Peace would create an environment where the message of Islam could flourish. The immediate aftermath was difficult. The Muslims were ordered to sacrifice their animals and shave their heads, completing their pilgrimage rituals right there at Hudaybiyah before returning to Medina. Initially, they were so disheartened that they hesitated to obey. Seeing this, the Prophet, on the advice of his wife Salama, performed the rituals himself. When his companions saw him do so, they all followed suit, their loyalty overriding their disappointment. As they began their journey back to Medina with heavy hearts, a new revelation came down from God. The 48th chapter of the Quran, named Al-Fath, which means the victory. The chapter begins with the powerful words, "Indeed, we have granted you a clear victory." This divine confirmation transformed their perspective. The companions, who had been saddened, now understood. This treaty was not a defeat. It was a strategic masterpiece, a manifest victory granted by God. So how did this seemingly disadvantageous treaty turn into a clear victory? The benefits began to unfold almost immediately. The 10-year truce was a game changer. The constant warfare and skirmishes had consumed resources and created an atmosphere of fear and hostility. Now, with peace established, people could interact more freely. The Quraysh, who had previously only seen Muslims as enemies on the battlefield, could now meet them, talk to them, and observe their character and conduct. This period of peace allowed the message of Islam to spread like never before. The Prophet and his companions could now focus on dawah, inviting people to Islam. Delegations were sent to neighboring tribes and even to the rulers of powerful empires like Persia and Byzantium. In the 2 years following the treaty, the number of people who embraced Islam was greater than all the years before it combined. The treaty had effectively removed the main obstacle to the spread of Islam, the political and military power of the Quraysh. The clause about alliances also played a crucial role. Soon after the treaty, the Qusa tribe, who had a long-standing good relationship with the Prophet's clan, announced their alliance with the Muslims. Meanwhile, their rivals, the tribe of Banu Bakr, allied with the Quraysh. This set the stage for future events. What about the most difficult clause, the one-sided return of people? Even this turned out to work in the Muslims' favor in an unexpected way. Shortly after the treaty, a new convert from Mecca named Abu Bazir escaped to Medina. True to the treaty, the Prophet told him he must return. The Quraysh sent 2 men to escort him back. On the way, Abu Bazir cleverly managed to overcome his guards and escape again, but instead of returning to Medina, where he knew he couldn't stay, he established a small settlement on the coast, on the caravan route from Mecca to Syria. Soon, other men who escaped from Mecca and couldn't be sheltered in Medina joined him. This group began raiding the Quraysh's trade caravans. They were not officially part of the Muslim state in Medina, so the Prophet was not violating the treaty. This situation became so problematic for the Quraysh that they themselves wrote to the Prophet begging him to nullify that specific clause and allow the men to come to Medina where he could control them. What had seemed like the most humiliating term was voluntarily cancelled by the Quraysh themselves. The Treaty of Al-Hudabiya was a testament to the Prophet's long-term vision and profound wisdom. He understood that true victory isn't always about winning on the battlefield. Sometimes it's about creating the conditions for peace to thrive, for hearts and minds to be won over not by the sword but by principles, character, and truth. The peace, however, did not last the full 10 years. Just 2 years later, in 630 AD, the Banu Bakr tribe, with the help of some members of the Quraysh, attacked the Qusa tribe, who were allies of the Muslims. This was a clear violation of the treaty. The Quraysh had broken their own agreement. This breach gave the Prophet Muhammad the justification to act. He assembled a massive army of 10,000 faithful men and marched on Mecca. The strength of the Muslims had grown so much during the period of peace that the Quraysh, seeing the size of the army, realized that resistance was futile. The city of Mecca surrendered peacefully. The Prophet entered his hometown not as a conqueror seeking revenge, but as a humble servant of God, granting a general amnesty to his former enemies. The idols in the Kaaba were destroyed and the sanctuary was rededicated to the worship of the one true God. The Treaty of Al-Hudabiya was the crucial stepping stone to this final bloodless conquest of Mecca. It was a strategic retreat that paved the way for an incredible advance. It teaches us a powerful lesson about patience, trusting in a higher plan, and understanding that sometimes the path to victory lies not in confrontation, but in peacemaking and strategic patience. It truly was, as the Quran described it, a clear and manifest victory. Thank you for watching. If you found this story inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into pivotal moments in history. See you in the next video.